All right. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matt McKibbin. I've been in the space for a while now, in blockchain space since 2013, really, and have had a wild ride, as most of the people in this space have. Founded a couple different companies. Some of them have been successful, some of them have not. Ubiquity. Actually, David Mundrus of Tribe is here. We helped do BitNation, the first iteration of BitNation, and left that project. Ubiquity doing the first blockchain-based title transfer on top of Bitcoin, a little early on colored coins. D10E, if you guys have heard of the D10E conference, I founded that with Brock Pierce. And now, just like a lot of people, we're doing ICO consulting and advising. Since we've been involved in ICO since the first one, since Mastercoin was the first ICO that happened, and then since then they've had a lot of them. So Decentranet is our company, and so today I'm not gonna be pitching you on my product. You're not gonna buy my tokens, but we're gonna talk a little bit about enabling new types of startup jurisdictions. And how the blockchain and decentralization kind of fits in with that, and a lot of political decentralization. So we'll go here. Click. Maybe. There we go. All right, so we know that technology has kind of always been ahead of political and governmental social organizations. It kind of shifts society forward in a lot of ways. We can see some of the different ways. We had slavery, and then we had the cotton gin. So that kind of destroys that kind of centralized coercive institution of slavery. We have the internal combustion engine, which allows for people to not use horses, and that pushes society forward. Mobile communications all over the world allows for people to not have to use couriers. And as we continue, the shift is actually accelerating in a lot of ways. We're seeing technology get faster and faster. And if you're familiar with some of the stuff that Ray Kurzweil talks about in terms of the law accelerating returns, we're seeing technology accelerate faster and faster. Even Moore's law is getting faster. And so what is like the next shift? We're all in this room because of the next shift of blockchains and this trust layer on the internet that allows for everyone to communicate, do business together without actually having to trust a lot of different disintermediaries. It decentralizes a lot of things that we usually had to trust banks and governments to keep our records. We now have this worldwide ledger that allows us to work with each other in a decentralized fashion. Decentralization, right? Just like with D10E, D10E stands for decentralized. This is the theme of what this technology is capable of doing. And so this decentralization, when we had the original centralization during the Renaissance and during a lot of the Industrial Revolution, we had people that were very decentralized. A lot of them were entrepreneurs. A lot of the people were, making their own ends meet. And then we had this, factorization, this centralization, where we had agricultural farming, where we had people just to go into factories and do specific jobs, and we had all the different industries that came out of that. We're now seeing a decentralization back towards people being entrepreneurs and creating value with each other without just going and working for a corporation for 30 or 40 years and expecting that to be, what you do. You have to be a little more creative, especially with a lot of automation going on as well. So we're going to see a lot of these technologies go back to individual ownership decentralization. Right now, we're seeing the blockchain decentralize a lot of databases. We're seeing the Internet of Money decentralize currencies. We're seeing a separation of state and money, a monetary reformation, if you will. And then with that, we're going to see a lot of other applications that that kind of move society into a societal reformation, not just money, but different types of identity apps instead of using the state as an identity provider, property registration, distributed work areas. And so you're not going to have just a centralized place. You're going to be able to be mobile, digital nomading, things like that. In terms of more decentralization, back before we had, New York Times, we had all that, then we had YouTube. You were able to actually, go around and you had your own, personal view in the world that you could share. Blogging, Craigslist markets, things like that. That's more distributed, more decentralized, and now we're getting ones that are actually, instead of having YouTube in the middle, you're having the actual content producers being paid directly with blockchain-based applications. So what's driving this? We all have this, sum of human knowledge here in our fingertips right now. We have more information at our fingertips here than the president did in 1994. So we can literally tap into whatever we want, whatever types of information there. We have lots of different types of networks that are being developed both on blockchain as well as mobile data networks. And then cryptography. Strong cryptography allows for you to have ownership over what you have, sovereignty, and it doesn't allow for anyone else to take what you have unless they can crack it. So what is the next thing that decentralization is focused on? I'm going to say it's cities and special economic zones, and we're going to see a political decentralization. Who here is familiar with what a special economic zone is? Joe is. So a couple people, most of them I've talked to before. Okay, so special economic zones have been found. They're areas where you carve out your own economic laws in a host country. When they tried it in Shenzhen, so in Shenzhen, 30 plus years ago, was a 30,000 person fishing village. It now is 30 million people. It's a really robust economy. However, it doesn't have a lot of common law there, British common law. It doesn't have a lot of environmental protections. And it's a zone 1. It allows for friendly investment economic rules, but it's better than communism, right? But it's not the greatest economic zone. We had Dubai and Hong Kong, which is kind of the zone 2.0, which allows for British common law, arbitration, international law, environmental protection, and building those laws from the ground up in a way that allows the rest of the world to communicate. And then we're positing that we're going to be seeing a lot of these zone 3.0s. And there's a couple of ones. Actually, Bill Gates just put down, $80 million for a smart city in Arizona. So that's a big news story. I don't know that it's a special economic zone specifically, but it is going to be a zone which basically builds the governance from the ground up there. And actually, Saudi Arabia, I have it written down here as well. Saudi Arabia just announced over the past month that they're going to be doing a zone called NOEM. It's adjacent to the Red Sea, Gulf of Aqaba, near maritime trade. They're putting $500 billion into this zone. It's going to be 26,000 square kilometers. Will operate under its own rules, separate from the rest of the kingdom. They envision driverless cars. They envision robotics doing it, and environmental sustainability. They're not going to be operating on petroleum, right? Solar, all of that. And then they will be using blockchain and decentralized applications, I hope, to do their governance services. So it's clean, transparent, and very, very efficient. If you were going to build your new city, you're not going to have a DMV. Okay? You don't need a DMV. We don't like the DMV. Right? The DMV is not great. We would rather use an identity decentralized application such as Uport or Civic or one of these other ones, and maybe even have a dApp store. And so we'll talk a little bit about more of that. So these Zone 3.0s, specifically the frameworks that I really like is a ZEDI, which we can talk a little bit about more in a minute, but they're being developed all over the world. Some have more permissive legislation or autonomy than others. Roger Ver is attempting to buy his own sovereign nation down in the Caribbean, and then he can write his own rules. I think he's very, very interested in that. We'll see if he's able to, it's going to take a lot of international diplomacy to do that, and we'll see how that works out. A lot of lawyers and things that he probably is not excited about there. So the cities are being decentralized. I think that as these different types of special economic zones become more popular, we're going to see them pop up all over the world as people say, look, we have a voice, we have a large centralized institution such as the United States federal government, right? We don't really have a voice that much in what they say. If you go talk to Trump, he's probably not going to care what you say. However, if you have a small jurisdiction, you can have a voice, and you can easily exit to other jurisdictions and competitive governance that allow you to kind of pick and choose the rules that are the best. And so these are experiments. These are experiments, just like we're experimenting with cryptocurrencies in terms of money. We can experiment with rules and governance and frameworks, as well as the applications that can be envisioned to do that. So by many of these things, we're going to do these very well. We're going to have, public safety designed from the ground up, economic vibrancy. You can do business registration there. One of the main things that I think that will come out is that it'll be restorative environmental from as a value. Instead of just protecting, you're going to say, okay, how are we going to design this zone so that it actually restores the environment around it and makes it better than it was before. Education, I think that needs to go through a large reformation, specifically in the United States. We have a public school system that, but if you could go into a special economic zone thing with an education system designed for the 21st century, that may be really attractive for entrepreneurs that are able to work from anywhere and have their kids in the next level educational systems. Innovation, employment in the next 20 years is not going to look like what it did in the past 20 years. It's going to be mobile, it's going to be distributed, decentralized, and they're not going to be doing the same things as you were 20 years ago. So what would one of these zones look like? Now, this is where you can put your imagination cap on and you can say, okay, if I was going to design my own zone from the ground up, was going to get investors, maybe I was going to ICO my zone, right? Maybe I was going to have a security token or some sort of ownership token, shares in the zone. What would it look like and how would I design that? And what would be attractive for people to come live there, right? Today's cities, we have a lot of restricted national lands, cumbersome requirements. I mean, how many tens of thousands of regulations are put on the books every year? Old governance of city councils, a lot of times especially, is corrupted. We can see the corruption. I know a lot of people from the developing world have never had good governance services at all, and that's what a lot of these special economic zones bring, is a way of having fixed and good special economic governance services. And so the 3.0 cities, we're going to plan and have a lot of permissive legislation. I call it permissive legislation. We have the ability to write our regulations from the ground up that makes sense. Our SEC regulations aren't going to be based on regulations written in the 1930s in the United States. That doesn't make any sense. It was before the internet. It was before most of these things have ever been conceived. So having regulations that apply from it, almost 100 or 70 years ago, we can write them from the ground up. And then you're gonna, the civic participation, and you get to participate in the governance structure, and it's very clear what you're doing as a citizen, as a part of this community, of this network. And you own the rights through a cryptographic ledger that says you own it, not a county recorder. So if I'm going to design a city from the ground up, I don't need to have an office with a county recorder's office. I need to have a governance decentralized application that does property registration, and it interacts with my governance identity application. The blockchain, one of the biggest things that the blockchain is going to be able to provide is identity for the people that have never had any identity services, credit scores, things like that, where when they have a phone, they have some sort of way of getting their identity that transfers to all the different types of applications and credit scores and things like that. So a little bit more about some of the frameworks that are being designed. Liquid democracy is going to be one of the really main key voting and governance things. Who here is familiar with liquid democracy? Not that many. All right, so you can, in liquid democracy, a lot of them are being designed on blockchain, where you can delegate certain decision-making abilities within your governance structure to people that would be really good at making a decision about that. So if there's a nuclear power decision, I don't know that my senator or congressman has any idea about what nuclear power or safety needs to be done. I'm going to delegate my voting on some sort of specific issue to a nuclear scientist, maybe. If there's a climate change decision-making thing, I don't know that my congressman or senator really is going to make it. Maybe I can delegate it to a nonprofit organization with the specific stated goal, or a DAO maybe, with the specific stated goal of making decisions about climate change for me. And so we can experiment with these types of governance democracy. We want to make it entrepreneur-friendly. We want to make sure that the people in the rest of the world have the ability to register their business. Hernando de Soto, if you've ever read The Mystery of Capital, really, really good book. And he goes, this is in the 90s, but he goes through the process of registering your house and registering a business in Lima, Peru, in the late 90s, I believe, mid-90s. And it took thousands of dollars back then and like a year and a half. It was literally impossible for the average person to register a business, right? And so with virtual jurisdictions, we'd be able to have like an e-Estonia program. Anyone in the world could register their business there and have a virtual jurisdiction with governance services like dispute resolution, identity, things like that. Marketplaces, we want to be able to buy and sell all of our goods and software, currency, localized, specialized currencies. So with some of the new technologies that are coming out, that liquidity enhanced revenue streams, we're able to, say, take property taxes as a revenue stream, and we could tokenize that and create a currency of the jurisdiction that is just based on the property taxes or rent. And that's one of the things that we're looking at as well. Identity, communication, fundraising. It's been really hard to fund SEZs. Not everyone understands the values and metrics of a startup society. It's very new. And so if you could have an equity token in your startup jurisdiction that you knew had really friendly entrepreneurial terms, you would want to invest in that jurisdiction, not only for the real estate, but for everyone else being able to develop. This is a massive social impact. Like I said, special economic zones are responsible for bringing about 400 million people out of poverty in China alone. Zoning for prosperity versus zoning for poverty. And communism is always zoned for poverty, always. Communism doesn't work. So we want to write those rules. And so one of my favorite things is we get to, we're calling it permissive legislation. If you wanted to test out, let's say, your flying drone prototype in a city, you're going to have to go through a grueling process with the FAA. You're going to have to go through, like in DC, you literally can't even fly drones, and that's where I've been based. So where are you going to demo these things at scale? How are you going to test it? Well, in the special economic zones, we can write our own FAA regulations, and we can say, we want you as a company to come and test your at-scale drone flying car, so we don't have to So we don't have to go through these burdensome regulations. We can write our own that makes sense for the companies to come down there. Longevity research, biomedical tourism. We can write our own FDA and those types of medical regulations. Securities regulations, as I mentioned. So the demo at scale is really, really, really interesting for different new types of technology. So, who will build the government is kind of an old libertarian joke that we have. Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. We can have flying cars, right? we can go from one place to another and build the infrastructure from the ground up. So future applications of this type of jurisdictional seasteading, Blue Frontiers, Peter Thiel's the visionary behind seasteading. Blue Frontiers is the for-profit, Seasteading Institute. Blue Frontiers is the for-profit entity that's just really gotten underneath there. They're going to do an ICO, I believe, in the next year, and they have a special economic zone that they're building a floating city in Tahiti, and then they're going to basically, build it on land and then launch it off the coast, and they can float around and go wherever the hell they want, right? It's paradise. And maybe they'll have flying cars too. Virtual jurisdictions are really, really important, where you can register your business, register whatever you're doing in that jurisdiction there. Startup societies in general, And then, I mean, I think that this applies to Mars colonies, moon colonies. If you're going to go build something on another planet, you've got to have a framework for how you're going to do the governance with those humans up there, right? It really makes sense. And I think that, we all kind of talk about, the cryptocurrencies going to the moon, right? Well, I want them to go, as high as they can so we can actually tokenize the moon with a startup society. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then Mars, hopefully we can occupy Mars and do it. So thanks for listening to the thing. And we are working on a project. I can't talk a lot about it, but we have, using the ZETI frameworks that Honduras has developed over the past 10 years, we have a project we're going to be working on where we're going to create our own jurisdiction, write the rules, and we will be raising funds for that over the next couple months in terms of seed, as well as then doing an ICO next year. Doing ICOs at the end of the year in December is really hard, but getting your pre-seed, get everything ready. And there's a lot of curveballs that come with doing an ICO in general, and starting your own jurisdiction is a little bit harder. So thank you very much. Any questions? I'm happy to take questions. Is there a microphone, or just yell it?
Yeah, Matt, that was great. You talked a lot about things getting a lot more efficient, happening a lot faster. So what are the risks that would occur when things, businesses get registered faster, property gets purchased faster? What are some of the risks that will happen in those societies, in those zones as a result of that rapid?
Yeah, I mean, I think that creative destruction is really important in the entrepreneurial and innovative economy, where you have people testing lots of different ideas really fast. I mean, if you read the book Big Bang Disruption, if you check it out, they talk about how all these entrepreneurs were doing with these apps, and they're starting to build these frameworks where they're like, all right, test this, didn't work, boom, now we have Google Maps, right? didn't work. And so we have these Big Bang disruptions. I think that will get faster. I think that people will learn to fail more, which failure is really important in entrepreneurship. Because if you haven't failed a couple times, if you succeed on your first entrepreneurial business, you don't know what it feels like to fail, and it hurts, but you got to pick yourself back up. And so I think that will be improved. I think the rest of the world is very entrepreneurial in general. So if these are impact areas that have never had that, they're already entrepreneurial in that, and so it just provides good governance jurisdictions for them to actually fail in a good way. Anyone else? Questions?
Yeah, if you could just take one of the areas that you see changing and explain in a little more detail how blockchain technology facilitates that change.
Sure. I really like the I really like the identity portion of it. Blockchain technology, there's 3 to 4 billion people on the planet that don't have any banking services at all. And now they're starting to leapfrog the traditional banking systems with this, because you can be your own bank, right? The same thing with identity. The world has massive amounts of migrants. There's people all over the world that have no way of interacting with the global economy because they don't have an identity. They don't even have a government to provide an identity service for, because the government's underfunded or there's chaos going on there. And so giving people the ability to start a reputation and an identity that's separate from their jurisdictional, monopoly on those governance services traditionally, on the Internet of Money, it gives them, is going to be one of the biggest things, because they can then enter into the world economy like never before.
How does blockchain make it easier for somebody who doesn't have an identity to have one?
So right now we trust really centralized institutions with our identity services. So we have Equifax, right? Equifax is one of our identity services. We trust Google, we trust Facebook, and they own your data. Google and Facebook are one of their identity providers, as well as your local government provider. And a lot of places in the world don't even have those good identity providers. So if you can have an identity DApp that represents you on the Internet of Money, on the ability for everyone to transact with each other without central intermediaries, you can then build a credit score. You can do microloans with that identity, and you can see that that person's a trustworthy person, and you can give them a little bit of loans. Blockchain makes that easier because it decentralizes it and doesn't necessarily need a centralized institution to run that. It allows for you to have self-sovereign identity no matter where you go, whatever jurisdiction you're in. Does that make a little bit of sense? Check out, uport.me is the consensus project. Uport.me is an identity dApp. Civic is a really cool one with Vinnie Lingham. There's, I think there's probably going to be a couple more of them, but go check out those projects, and they'll kind of show you the problems in the industry of identity, and then trying to show how they're going to solve them in a different world. 2 minutes, okay. Yeah. The answer is I don't know. The answer is I don't know who the decision maker should be. But the decision maker should be someone with the reputation and understanding and knowledge to actually make the decision. And if I was going to delegate my responsibility to make a decision about climate change, I would say, all right, well, does this person believe in climate change? Or does this person believe that the humans are impacting the earth in different ways? Or don't they? And can I take that portion of my vote and give it to someone that is dedicated, some sort of nonprofit or person that's dedicated and has a PhD in earth science, maybe? Oh, I don't know how this is going to. What's the process of delegating it, or? So if you were to create the governance structure from the ground up, and you were to say, okay, human civic participants, you really need to start paying attention to what you're doing in this large scale, and we're giving you the ability to delegate your voting power, representative democracy, that's what we do, but we're going to give you, instead of just one dude who runs for office and then promises the world and then does nothing, we can give you the ability to retract that at any time through a blockchain-based identity and voting system, and then we also give you the ability to delegate certain votes that are going to come up within our legislation to parties other than that one dude who took a bunch of money when he was running for office, right? So is that thing? So how that comes about, how those rules and things get instituted, even in America, I don't know. I don't see that happening very, very soon. I see that being built in new jurisdictions specifically. And then you can have consultants, that would maybe consult on that issue and give their, I'll cut it off. And give they're saying like, I would vote yes on this because of these reasons, and we have a history of understanding this topic. Does that make sense? We can talk more after. I'm getting caned off. So thank you very much, everyone.
Can we get McKibbin